Hello?
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Maddie.
Hi, I'm hearing you. Yeah, that's fine. Do you hear
Yes.
me?
Can you see me?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, that's a bonus for you.
Yeah, I know. uh, what's wrong, actually? I see my own face. I don't see yours.
No, my camera's not on.
All right, okay,
Oh, wait a moment.
right. Oh, great. Yeah, I see
Yeah.
you. Hi.
Ah, that's good.
Oh, great. Okay. Nice to
Yes.
see you, Michael.
Yes, hello.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure as well.
Actually, I know you from 2010. I mean, when I started reading your book. So it's been 10 years since so I started reading your book. Yeah.
Ah, well.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah.
And how long have you been working in Berlin for?
So Berlin, it's been almost 5 years in Berlin.
Hmm.
Europe, it's been almost 12 years. I mean, I started studying in France, then I moved to Barcelona, and then Bergamo in Italy, and then Tübingen, and then finally Berlin.
Is
Right.
this a choice not to work in an Iranian university?
Yeah, it's actually my choice. I mean, I decided to come back here. Actually, I was teaching back then in 2006, 7, 8. I was teaching in Iran. So
Right.
yeah, then I decided to come here, and after my graduation, I moved to Berlin from Tübingen.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. How about
Yes.
you? I hear you've been retired, I suppose, yeah?
Yes, I'm retired now.
All
Yes.
right. Okay.
Yes. So I don't do any more teaching.
Okay.
I'm pleased to say.
You have a lot of spare time then. Yeah.
Yes.
Just, I mean, one remark about the technicality. I'm not actually that much used to calling through Zoom, but I suppose there is a limited half an hour, I suppose, time. Yeah. Like, I mean, is it so? It's like half an hour?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never arranged a meeting myself. So do you want to start
Yeah, we can
immediately?
start, and just like, I mean, in case it got interrupted after half
Yes.
an hour, we can call. I mean, we can call again and
Yes.
restart and resume our conversation. So yeah, I
Yes.
can start. As I told you, there. I mean, I've got a couple of students. I have got this online course about humor and laughter, actually. And so I thought it would be very pleasing and appropriate for us to have a person who has specified a book, actually in 2005, uh,
Yes.
about ridicule and laughter. The book had, as far as I remember, like 10 chapters, and it had like some historical and theoretical facets, actually, like two parts. I try to
Yes.
divide my questions also in two parts. The first part are sort of like the questions I ask in order for you to describe actually this itinerary actually in your book. And the second part would be some remarks. We can have some more interaction about your take on humor. Um, Actually, I suppose it should be made right at the outset that your book was quite actually your critique of humor was quite interesting, and it really drew my attention right away when I started reading that book, because your account of humor was a kind of it yielded a kind of symbiosis between laughter and ridicule for me. It was quite new for me, and so my first question is that. Um, Actually, why is a critical approach to humor, or why did you think, or do you think a critical approach to humor is at all necessary?
I think one reason is that, particularly coming from America, there's a lot of work on humour which seems to think that humour and laughter are totally wonderful, and that the more we laugh, the better health we have, the better people we are, and the better our lives. And there's two reasons to be skeptical of this. One is that the science is much weaker than is claimed. It's almost as if people want to believe in the miraculous powers of laughter and humour, and so the tiniest little bit of evidence gets hyped up out of all proportion to its scientific basis, and some of it is actually rests on very, very shaky and unpersuasive evidence if you look closely at it. But there's also another reason. If we sentimentalize humour and think humour is just wonderful, we forget the many, many jokes which are cruel. Bergson, the great philosopher, over 100 years ago said, laughter requires an anesthesia of the heart. You have to harden your heart sometimes because you're laughing at people. There's a cruelty to many forms of humour. So if we just concentrate on those lovely moments when people come together and share laughter, which do happen, we forget the cruelty of humour.
All right. So so you believe there are two reasons actually for your approach to humor, or your critique of humor, as I mean the status quo actually of humor. The first one is your skepticism of science, as I understood.
Well, the skepticism of that science.
Of that science, or science of humor.
And actually, since I wrote the book, there's been a crisis, particularly within psychology, about the so-called scientific standards of psychology, because replications are never done, or seldom, or if they're done, they're not published. And so there's a lot of evidence which psychologists have accepted for years, which is now being questioned as not that strong or not that scientific.
All right, okay. But I suppose, like you started, I mean, you have another book or other books. I mean, that's there you try to sort of deal with the questions. I mean, like the book you have about arguing.
Yes.
There you also have this approach of actually pondering or considering or taking into account the emergent context or the emergent milieu. As a sociologist, actually, it makes absolute sense of the phenomena rather than picking up the product, the act, the behavior, and focusing on. I suppose humor, I mean, your analysis of humor is also definable in that regard, that you try to contextualize it. Is it true?
That's right. For social context is absolutely important. If you over psychologize humor and think it's just a matter of the individual having an emotion and laughing, you forget that humor nearly always depends on a social context, and people laugh together with others much more strongly than they laugh on their own. In fact, laughing on your own is a sign of actually maybe being mentally disturbed.
Right. So can I put it that way, that you have, I mean, your take on humor or your take on laughter is more a kind of, is more a social analysis of humor in opposition to a psychological understanding of humor?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean, my background is actually in social psychology. My PhD many years ago was in social psychology. And the problem is many social psychologists, but not my teacher, who was the great Henri Tajfel, seem to transform social psychology into individual psychology and forget that we live our lives amongst other people in groups in social contexts, and that psychology should be a social science rather than a biological science.
And it's sort of implied in the book. I mean, it reminds me of the traces in the book. You're talking about I mean, you make this comparison between Freudian grasp of humor and the neo-Freudian grasp of humor, specifically when you're talking about Erich Fromm's analysis of human psyche. I mean, there is a point you're talking about the fact that Erich Fromm, for instance, or you're quoting Marcuse actually, that in the way, I mean, the way people like Erich Fromm analyze social phenomena is actually they do their best to get rid of the repression side of social phenomena. That's why you call it, I suppose, a kind of positivist ideology, like inherent in this outlook. Is it true?
Yeah. Yes, but I think it's much stronger in what are called positive psychologists, which is a big movement now, particularly in the United States, where you're taught to emphasize what are called positive emotions. And when positive psychologists analyze something like psychology, all they seem to notice are these positive emotions, and they sort of push away. They themselves repress the negative aspects of humor.
Right.
And I think I also feel that Freud's analysis of humor was absolutely brilliant, because he always looked at humor in terms of the social context and in terms of not just the individual functions of humor, but the social functions.
Right. So the second point, actually, for me was that there are points that you talk about. I mean, sometimes sporadically you talk in the or implicitly you talk actually about the quality of laughter. Given that you don't seem to offer a deep-seated aversion actually to humor and laughter, you seem, on the other hand, to sort of looking for a kind of, smarten up laughter, as you call it. How can we smarten up laughter?
Did I use that phrase? Smarten up?
Yeah, I mean, like literally.
I've totally forgotten. It was 15 years ago.
I know. But I mean, from today's point of view, how do you think it is possible to boost laughter's quality or to smarten up laughter? I mean,
well, it's not a matter of boosting laughter quantitatively so that people laugh and laugh and laugh. It's laughing in the right way, I think, because it's often political or ideological, the things you laugh at. And this results in the cruelty of laughter, that it used to be assumed by many psychologists that bigots and those who are highly prejudiced had no sense of humor. And that's absolutely not true.
All right.
Because there are many, many racist jokes and bigoted jokes and so on. And we can't ignore them. Freud did, even though he lived in a time of great bigotry. And he must have suffered bigoted humor personally, but he didn't discuss it. It was almost like it was too raw, too painful for him. to do so. It's a big gap in his book.
Right. I see. So, I mean, may I paraphrase it in a way that laughter in itself doesn't guarantee actually any kind of openness or open-mindedness, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
as you said, there are lots of bigoted ideologues, actually, who are witty.
Yes. That's right. That's absolutely right. Also, laughter doesn't necessarily mean humour. There are other functions of laughter in interaction. Sometimes people will laugh to show that they're sympathising with someone who's talking, or someone when they're telling someone else about their problems will laugh to show that they've not been defeated by their problems.
Right.
So
Right.
we can use laughter in many, many different ways.
Right. Right.
It's a means of communication, which is why we seldom laugh when we're on our own, because we don't need to communicate to ourselves with laughter.
Right. Okay. So the third, actually, the third part of the third question is that you seem to have a kind of historical analysis of laughter and ridicule rather than providing a history of laughter and humor and ridicule, actually. Can I tell it? Can I put it this way, that your analysis of laughter and ridicule, in its historical materialism, let's say, is actually a gesture against commodification of laughter. I mean, do you mean? I mean, can we use this word like commodification from the Frankfurt School that every now and again you use in the book as a kind of the way that laughter and humor are treated today?
Yes, well, it's certainly, it's not just laughter is commodified, but humour is a huge commercial product. With films, television programs, there are so many so many people earning their livings by making other people laugh. And it's almost like we're brought up to laugh at certain things and not other things. And going back to the politics of laughter, I think there's a particularly important distinction to be made. Often people laugh at those whose social status is higher than them, but people will mock presidents, or people will mock particularly dictators. They will often show great bravery in mocking dictators.
Right.
Dictators, by and large, loathe being mocked.
Right.
You can see this, although he's technically not a dictator, with Trump, President Trump. He hates anyone laughing at him.
Right.
He won't take a joke. He's very thin-skinned. And on the other hand, there's laughter at those who are in a lower social status, whereas people who think themselves rather superior will laugh at the so-called cultural or non-cultural choices of the lower classes, their ways of talking, their ways of dressing, and so on. The rich have often laughed at the poor. Now, that sort of laughter, I think, is very, very dangerous and morally unpleasant. It rests on the maintenance of hierarchy and the maintenance of social order. Laughing at the superiors, laughing at the powerful, can be dangerous and something to be applauded at particular times.
Right, right. And probably it is what is missing actually. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is actually what you probably encourage in your book, uh, to be able to to laugh at at those who are higher than us, or superior to us, actually.
Except I think there is a big fault in the book, which is the treatment I gave to the Earl of Shaftesbury, who I treated as if he were an aristocrat to be laughed at. I hadn't fully appreciated what he was doing. And I then, when I realized that I'd misunderstood him, misunderstood his humor, I wrote a book which really was a tribute to him, as a way of saying, sorry, I got that completely wrong. Shaftesbury was completely original in saying there is an important social function in humour, and it is a way of testing ideas. If you laugh at it and the idea seems to collapse in your conversation with others, everyone laughs at it, that's a way of finding out that the idea maybe didn't have much worth. So it had for him an important social function. But then he goes further and makes a connection which is so modern, it's unbelievable. He said that in order to test ideas, you need freedom. And there is a huge link between liberty and the ability to mock ideas.
Right.
And he then says, zealots, bigots, hate laughter because they cannot stand being mocked. And he had actually in mind particularly religious bigots.
Right.
And this is where it's quite astounding, but he had Christians in mind. He was thought, and I didn't appreciate this when I first wrote about him, he was thought by many of his contemporaries in Britain to be someone who was an awful figure because he was suspected of not being Christian, not having Christian views.
Right.
He lived at a time, particularly Protestantism in Britain had extreme leaders. And in the time of the English Civil War, which took place before he was alive, he was the next generation to follow. Right. In the time of the English Civil War, there were massacres between Protestants and Catholics, Protestants of this dimension and Protestants of that dimension. And Shaftesbury wanted to avoid the country slipping back into that attitude. And he thought humour was a huge way of guaranteeing liberty.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, I can link this idea, this approach, or this new approach to Shaftesbury from your standpoint to the fourth question. That is, it seems that you appreciate ridicule in comparison to laughter, simply because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, simply because in ridicule, you might have more interplay between humor and seriousness. I mean, you seem to really appreciate this facet that ridicule can deal with seriousness.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Well, ridicule like laughter, is dangerous because it depends who you're ridiculing and what you're ridiculing. If you're ridiculing those who have power and have the power to suppress laughter, then the ridicule, not because of its actually internal qualities, but because of its social function, may be a very important act of rebellion. But if it's the powers that be, those with power are ridiculing those without power, then the ridicule is not very pleasant. It can be an act of cruelty.
Right.
I think if you look at history, you can find plenty of examples.
Definitely everywhere, actually.
Or you don't have to look at history. You could look at the world.
So actually, the last question in this section for me is that it would be great if you actually expand a bit this interrelation between the new approach to laughter and this positivist ideology a bit further.
Right. That the positivist ideology is something new, I think. I don't think what I'm saying is anything new, because you can go back and get it from Shaftesbury, which I misunderstood.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's been previously a social philosophy which says that laughter and humour in itself is beneficial to health and beneficial to social relations in itself. There have been people who said this sort of humour is, or that sort of humour is, but not laughter in itself. And so, given that I have a background in psychology, I find much of positive psychology to be an oversimplification of the complexities of the human condition.
All right. But not only in human laughter, I mean, in all other spheres, probably.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, they tend to describe some emotions as positive emotions, and then the language is quite loose. But if a particular emotion is positive, it's very easy to find examples of that emotion being used quite negatively.
Right. All right. I see. So, I mean, I've got a couple of remarks, and you might correct me or just add to that, or just expand them. The first one is that I mean, your book or your approach to laughter and ridicule seems, at least on surface, that you are actually disparaging laughter. Although I don't think so. What do you think about it? I mean, don't you think that in our world today, we need more humor and laughter? I mean, aside from this positivist ideology.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not laughter in itself we need. We need to be able to mock certain things, mock certain powers that be, mock those who try to restrict our liberty. I mean, how do we deal with such a figure as Trump, Donald Trump? I'm sure when I wrote my book, I couldn't have imagined someone like Trump ever being elected. You can't argue with him. You can't point out that his different views seem to contradict each other. Well, you can do that, but he doesn't care about logic.
Mhm.
He cares about his status. But the one thing you can do is to laugh at him.
Right.
And that mockery,
Mhm.
I think,
Mhm.
is a political act. It is the same of the, and it's been said by those who lived under Stalin during Stalin's rule. But there were a lot of very hidden jokes about the dictator, and many people would rebel, not by force of arms, and certainly not with a vote, because they didn't have a vote. They would rebel quietly at home by telling jokes about the dictator, very bravely.
Right. Great.
Now, I live in a country where there is freedom. I'm very fortunate for that. I've lived all my life in a country with freedom. I would like to think that when that freedom is being threatened, and it is occasionally threatened, but it still exists, that I would be one of those who would tell jokes.
Right. Mm.
And I hope I would never tell jokes about those who are weak and poor and different.
Definitely.
Different colour skin or whatever.
I see. All right. Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the target of the joke, you can see that it's not always the construction or the technical features of a joke which make it funny to a particular audience. But you can tell the same joke about where the target is, for instance, lawyers or politicians, and we'll laugh at it. But when the joke is against foreigners or black people, and it can be the same joke, it's not funny.
Right. I see. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. But still, I mean, given the dominance of, I mean, back to theory, given the dominance of incongruity theory of humor to this day, I mean, both in cognitive sciences, neurosciences, and psychology of laughter, it seems that superiority theory of humor is a bit out of tune with the mood actually today. I mean, people actually shun away from, I mean, on the very moral, on the very moral, I mean, from the very moral point of view, people shun away from this conceptualization of laughter and humor as laughing at somebody. They just actually it's been more common today, at least in academia, to think of laughter as something logically discernible, something that you can dismantle through this inconsistency of meaning, actually. Don't you think that superiority theory has been unfairly actually excluded?
Yes, I mean, the thing about incongruity theory is not all incongruities are found funny. It's a particular form of incongruity on a particular occasion, which is found funny. And it can be playing with words. And it's almost like a conjuring trick. You're telling a story which seems to be leading one way, and suddenly you surprise people by ending up that the word you thought which meant that is being used in a totally different way.
Right.
But there are times when, if you told a joke depending on wordplay, it wouldn't be funny. For instance, if in the middle of a funeral, of a tragic funeral, you started telling jokes, the incongruities would not be found funny. They'd be offensive.
Mhm.
So it's not just incongruities.
All right.
And the social function of ridicule, which is why I think that aspect of humour is so socially basic, is that in order to have social life, we must have codes of behaviour and social behaviour. And they put pressure on us. It's easier just to act in terms of our wishes and our personal wants, but we have to take into account the feelings of others. We have to be polite. If someone gives us something, we have to say thank you. If we want something, we have to say please. Sometimes we have to say, oh, this will be in English, oh, I'd be so grateful if you would do this. And it's a bit of an effort rather than just saying, give me.
True.
Now,
true.
How do we learn to do this? And Irving Goffman had a brilliant social theory, which is that social life depends on the fear of embarrassment. That if we don't obey all these little codes and act in a socially appropriate way, we will find ourselves being embarrassed by other people.
All right.
And we fear being embarrassed. I don't want someone to say, oh, no, that is, you've been so rude. But what Goffman could have done to take it further is to say, why are we embarrassed? And there is some evidence that what is embarrassing to us, if it happens to us, we find funny if it happens to someone else. But if we get someone's name wrong, or we go out and we haven't noticed that our clothing is buttoned up appropriately or zipped, we will start waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, oh, wasn't that awful? People were looking at me. But if we notice someone else doing that, we laugh.
Right, yeah.
And what is embarrassing can be very funny to someone else. And even if we like laughing, we don't like, by and large, being laughed at. And it is not just the fear of embarrassment, it's the fear of being laughed at, which makes us polite and which makes us caring. And it's probably taught to children at a very young age, because after the age of about 5 or whatever, children don't like being laughed at.
That's true, yeah. Actually, it also reminds me of the Bergsonian understanding of laughter. This kind of machinism, this kind of anesthesia. Yeah, really interesting.
That's why some of the great visual comics make their bodies as if they are machines. Yes, rather than socially appropriate. Whether it's Charlie Chaplin or whether it's Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean.
Right, you're right, yeah. I try to formulate my last question, actually, regarding our situation worldwide. I mean, this coronavirus and this COVID-19, I don't know which one is the appropriate name for it. I mean, given that your approach to laughter is more socially driven, do you also define laughter and ridicule? Or can you also define laughter and ridicule or imagine that in regard to natural catastrophe or natural driven catastrophe like coronavirus today?
Yes, and again, there's a division between different sorts of laughter. A lot of teenage boys, particularly boys, or young boys, have laughed at, for many years, laughed at sickness, death, illness, weakness, and so on. It's as if they translate their own personal insecurities into horrible jokes about those with illness. And I expect there are still young boys now making jokes about coronavirus, which indicates that their own fears maybe. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's what in English is often referred to as gallows humour. Mm. Freud had a wonderful example. The prisoner who was about to be hanged on the Monday morning and taken out to the gallows says, well, the week's starting off quite nicely. And where you tell a joke to lessen the horrors mm-hmm. of your own personal situation, and that takes a bit of bravery,
which is definitely,
in my view, to the jokes about the dictators.
Right, and it's definitely reminiscent of the Jewish humor. I mean, like the way actually they survived in the concentration camps.
Oh yes, I mean, there's examples that even in the most extreme social circumstances, not everyone, but some people will tell jokes and try to see the funny side of it.
Right. So can I put it this way, that even if with laughter you're not able actually to make any social or political changes, laughter still in itself can be a mechanism to survive, at least.
Yes, and more than just survive, but to survive with some sort of human dignity still intact.
All right.
And that suggests the importance of laughter for the human condition.
Mm-hmm. And probably that's here that you make this big and crucial distinction between laughing with dignity and laughing with health. I mean, like bearing health in mind, that it is healthy to laugh.
Yes, if you just laugh because it's healthy, it's like going to the gym. It's not. It's not a great moral act going to the gym.
True. Wonderful, Michael. That was a very brilliant, productive, and instructing discussion with you.
No, thank you.
If there is something that you want to add, actually.
No. What I want to add is I appreciate your insights and the way you've drawn me to speak about these things. And I must say, I had a very quick look at your thesis, and I was very impressed with the scholarship.
Thank you. That's my pleasure, Michael. And I have to also thank you on behalf of the Iranian audience in advance. I mean, we will have it subtitled hopefully soon, and I will, it would be served actually online for some of these students and those interested in laughter, humor, and sociology, let's say.
I also, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to correct my mistakes on Shaftesbury, because I think he has a message for those living perhaps today in Iran, or for some of those in Iran.
Right.
And the message, of course, is not about Islam particularly. It's a message which is just as much about Christianity and its potentiality, or any religious belief and its potentiality for a narrow view on the life. And I suspect, I hope some of your students even though I don't say it directly, may take the idea and think, yes.
Sure. I'm sure. I mean, when you talk about bigotry or zealotry, I
Mm.
mean, introduced through Shaftesbury, although I'm afraid to add that Shaftesbury is not, I mean, that particular article has not been translated. I'm actually translating that into Persian because I
Oh,
suppose it's very wonderful, instructive, and timely to have it translated. So I've actually started translating that, and hopefully that would be accomplished soon.
oh, that's wonderful. That's the article from my next book, is it, on the roots of critical psychology? Because
Ah,
I don't think, I can't remember where I published it, but I had the impression that I wasn't fair to Shaftesbury in Laughter and
in
Ridicule.
love. All right.
I laughed at him because he talked about gentlemanly behaviour,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and what he meant was respect for others.
Right. True. True. Yeah, that's an intriguing. I mean, that was really stunning to read that. I just stumbled upon that article last year. Actually, I I hadn't read the text as it was, and it was really stunning. I mean, I really thought of it as a very timely and contemporary analysis of raillery, mockery, and laughter.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And did you know that Bakhtin got a lot of his views about humour from Shaftesbury?
Oh no, I didn't know actually.
No, he stole them without acknowledgement.
Really?
Yes. Part of our philosopher called Cassira, who he
Mm.
read, and Cassira was a great admirer of Shaftesbury.
All right,
That's
interesting.
Cassira, yes.
All right. Wow.
Maybe I should send you some of this.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Definitely. Definitely. I hope actually it's a tiny world. I hope to see you somewhere in the world. If you happen to come to Berlin, I hope I can meet you here.
That would be very nice, but I have no plans at the moment. Because of the virus, I'm
Right.
staying at home, unfortunately.
Hopefully, when it is a bit constrained, you're always most welcome to meet here, yeah, in Berlin. That was wonderful again. That was, I mean, a very.
And if you're ever in Britain and want a trip to the Midlands, I would
Oh,
love to meet you.
definitely. I haven't been there yet, but I'm actually looking forward to traveling to England or to the UK actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I live in Nottingham.
in Nottingham.
And you may have heard of the legend of Robin Hood. I don't
Yeah,
know.
sure.
Yes.
Sure, definitely. Have you also taught on laughter?
No.
No.
I've taught on the history of psychology and mentioned Shaftesbury and compared him to Locke.
All right.
Oh yes, and when I did that, I sometimes use the example of their theories of humour.
Okay. All right. Okay. Wonderful. Great.
Mm. And you teach laughter, do you? Oh, not teach laughter. You teach the ideas of laughter. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, these online courses actually are my first experiments of teaching, or experiences actually of teaching about humor and laughter. Um, but like in Berlin, no, I'm just teaching languages. I'm teaching Persian in Berlin, actually. I'm
Are
a
you?
Persian
Yes.
teacher. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for a while I was translating. I mean, I was translating for the refugees, like German, Persian translator, interpreter, let's say. But for the time being, I'm teaching Persian to Germans who are interested in learning Persian.
All right. And how is it different teaching that from actually to your students teaching in Persian and talking
It's
talking and teaching Persian speakers.
it's
It
very
must be a
different.
liberation.
Definitely. I feel relieved. I mean, it's like, whoa, I'm teaching Persian, I'm teaching my mother tongue. It's so easy, it's so facile, you know, it's not comparable to teaching English or talking in German, you know, like that's quite daunting, you know, keeping talking all the time in another language. It's really demanding in a way.
Well, your English is superb.
Thank you very much
It
indeed.
really is.
Thanks a lot.
Mm.
So hopefully we will have another discussion sometimes if you have
Yes.
time. Yeah, we might talk like more precisely about your ideas. They are brilliant and it's still very fresh, and I'm really stunned. And again, I thank you on behalf of the Iranian audience who are going to watch you and listen to you. And
Well,
hopefully see you in Iran, who knows?
maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's been my pleasure, an absolute pleasure for me.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine. So I wish you a good evening, Michael.
And a good evening to you.
Thank you again.
It's been
Goodbye.
lovely. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.